Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar, New FDA Drug Distribution Report, What to Know, presented by ReadTech. I'm sure most of you are already familiar with the GoToWebinar platform, but please note the chat box that you'll see to the right-hand side of your screen. Please utilize this box to ask any questions during the presentation, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So if you're having any technical difficulties, definitely feel free to reach out to me via the chat box as well. So your presenters today are Gary Sainer, Senior Manager of Information Solutions at ReadTech, and David Wilson, the Senior Account Executive at ReadTech. Today, Gary and David will be covering the following topics: the drug distribution report overview, requirements, timing, and preparation and submission solutions, as well as a live Q&A as time allows. For anything that your speakers do not cover today, make sure that you do check out the Knowledge Center on our ReadTech website to view past webinars, blog posts, and case studies, or reach out directly to pharma@readtech.com for any questions that you may have. And with that, I will hand the reins off to Gary to get our presentation started.
All right, well, thank you very much, Erin. I know that David and I had, and actually we all collaborate on a big team here to pull the information together. A lot of new information about this particular topic because it's brand new and it's a huge learning curve, and impressed upon all of that is a very short deadline. So we'll go into some of the descriptions about the overview. This first section will cover the high-level description of the report and basically try to figure out what the heck this particular report is and why do I have to submit this information. It's a very common question. Don't have a lot of good answers there, but we'll take a look at that particular topic as well. So to get things rolling, let's first talk about the name of this particular report. I think what you have seen in many cases, all the documents surrounding this particular topic from the FDA use this very long name, reporting amount of listed drugs and biological products under Section 510J3 of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Well, that's a real handful. And you might have also heard short names for this particular topic. Drug distribution report, you might have also heard CARES 510J3 report or drug volume reporting, and that's not a full list. There's a couple other names out there. I don't know that industry has really settled down on a particular name. I'm going to be using drug distribution report, and every once in a while we might use the acronym DDR, but drug distribution report is what we kind of have adopted here at ReadTech for this particular topic. It's a little bit shorter and easy to work with. Now, there are a number of documents that describe this particular activity. If you go back and look at the CARES Act way back in 2020 March timeframe, there was included in that CARES Act, that Coronavirus Relief and Economic Security Act, a lot of topics. We're all kind of familiar with what was rolled out in that particular act, but embedded in there, may have not have caught your attention initially, was some additional clauses that indicated that FDA now has the authority and challenge to identify, prevent, and mitigate possible drug shortages. So that's the roots of this particular report. And then over a year went by, the FDA working out some of the details about how they were going to report this information and what were they going to collect as far as that reporting goes. And there's a couple notices there. You might want to follow the link for the draft guidance. That is a summary of the drug distribution report. That's a good overall description of the particular activities and the requirements. There is a parallel document that was actually released as a guidance for industry document, but that is final. And this parallel document deals more with the technical details. So they call it a technical conformance guide, and very valuable in the actual details down in the weeds of actually preparing the report. Interesting, that was rolled out as a final guidance, whereas the other draft guidance is still in draft. I checked this morning, and the final has not yet come out yet. But the comment period ended at the end of December of last year. So I expected, with this very short time frame, that the FDA would have reacted rather quickly and rolled a final version of that out, but it's not released as of yet. So that's the state of play of where we are today. I expect that draft guidance to come out in a final form very quickly. The other document is this Federal Register notice, basically, that says or indicates the availability of the draft guidance. Not too much more content there. But as a result of all these guidance, the takeaway is that the FDA is instituting this new annual distribution report for all listed drugs. So if a particular manufacturer or other registrant, as the FDA terms them, lists a drug, and again, that is linked back to the establishment regulation. So if a particular company has an establishment that you need to register, then that's coupled with the listing of a drug that is manufactured or in some way there's a business operation at that particular establishment. So drugs need to be listed. And this is a critical point to understand whether or not you're in scope or not. If you are responsible to list the drug, then that responsibility is now carried forward for you also to report the drug distribution information. So the information that needs to be reported is done on an annual basis, and it's for any of those drugs that are manufactured, prepared, propagated, compounded, or processed, and it also includes those repacking and relabelers out there. So anything that's facing commercial distribution and has that qualifier being listed. It includes a number of products, and we'll take a look at those in a second. We do get a lot of questions. Go ahead. Oh, hi there, David.
Here. Hey,
yep.
One of the items that last slide was describing there that and I know we have a frequently asked questions section where we'll get into some of these, but to hit it off right off the head, registrant, right, and who needs to do this. One of the main things we review through this is, while the registrant and the organization submitting these drug listings is who the FDA is calling out in the guidance, the draft guidance, there's a lot to be said there. And so I think a lot of what we'll review in the next couple of slides are helping you understand, well, what does that exactly mean, right? So stay tuned as we move through here.
Yeah, it can be pretty broad, and a lot of questions about contract manufacturers and private label distributors and other things. So anyway, we'll certainly make sure we touch on that. Trying to answer the question of why the FDA is introducing this requirement. If you go back to that CARES Act, there's a little bit more information in the wording there, and it extends over and above what I shared earlier. And basically, it provides a way for improving FDA's visibility into drug supply chains. If you look at some of those other published documents, there is some hints about some further reasons that FDA is collecting this information. But all of that comes up a little bit short as to understand actually how this report is going to be used. So that we understand it is related to possible drug shortage, but how that particular information is going to be used in the event there is a drug shortage, or how this particular bit of information is going to be handled, many times there's supply chain interruptions, and this doesn't really address supply chain interruption. It's really just talking about the source of the drug products in commercial distribution. Now, there might be some more detail when that drug distribution report draft guidance, when it goes final. Hopefully there'll be some more information about this. I know this is quite a frequent question that the FDA has recognized, that has come back from industry and on comments to that draft guidance. So we'll see. Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer to except what we see here in print as to why the FDA is collecting yet some more information on drug products.
Yeah, and Gary, that why is also something we're hearing in conversations with the organizations we support, and maybe even the concept of being able to streamline or improve when and where and why FDA is then doing facility inspections, right? So if more data that's supporting it might be able to help them determine which organizations should be reviewed or inspected at what cadence, right? Think of it from the perspective of the over-the-counter industry or the cosmetics industry, right? A manufacturer might be manufacturing primarily cosmetics and then a hand sanitizer, things like that. And maybe it was just one lot of hand sanitizers back in 2020, right? If they see that data, it can really help them, especially in the environment we find ourselves in, where right now I believe it's still they're still halting the inspection right now. So maybe it could even help move things to more virtual if different areas can be focused on. So yeah, well, like you said, that final guidance will definitely help.
Yeah. Now there was some confusion when this came out that was this the quality metrics data report. The quality metrics data is much more detailed. It has a lot more metrics about the internal production of a particular product. Lots that have been produced, lots that have been recalled, or lots that have been reworked, I should say, and lots that have been put away and had to be discarded. So it's not the exact same as what you might have heard of on the quality metrics data. So this drug distribution report is really just what goes out the door from your facility. So, but there might be some information regarding and influencing the way the FDA targets and prioritizes inspections. Certainly the quality metrics data had some impact there about the inspections. All right, so let's take a look now at the list of products that are in scope and out of scope. So the rule of thumb here is pretty much every drug that is listed, and that includes human and animal drug products, certainly those biologics. If you have prescription or over-the-counter, they're all in scope. Active pharmaceutical ingredients that are listed, final dosage forms, the medical gases, homeopathic, and so. And by default, if you list a drug product, this report would have to be submitted. Now, there is a provision for the FDA to exempt some products. So there is actually one order in place right now that affects 2 biologic products. If I remember right, they have to do with genes and also blood transfusions. So, those 2 have been carved out. That's the only 2 that the FDA has mentioned at this point in time. So by default, all those other products that are listed would need to submit a drug distribution report.
Yeah, not to get confused for the biologics with the electronic lot distribution report. So our understanding is it's both. FDA is now requiring both of these reports unless you fall under that exemption for the biologics, which from last check, it's not, it's a small percentage of the industry's BLAs.
Right, definitely. So in this next section, would like to take a look at a little bit more about the content. What do I actually have to submit? What do I have to do to comply with this report? So if we take a look at the content, there's information that would indicate that you need to organize the information by a number of different metrics. So as you look at your portfolio of products that you are placing into commercial distribution and have listed, think about these particular metrics and attributes, because there is data values for each one of these. And one of the first items right at the top is, okay, what's my reporting year? So this is, you know, from January 1 to December 31st of a particular year. Anything that's been distributed outside your control into commercial distribution or released, as the FDA refers to it. So you have to figure out a year and then identify those registered establishments that you own and are involved with. Inside that particular establishment, there could be one to many different business operations. So the FDA has a list, a short list of business operations. So you need to look at that short list and pick the one that's most appropriate. But for an establishment, for a particular business operation, there could be one to many individual products that are manufactured, so or processed in some fashion. So there is a national drug code that needs to be identified for each of those drug products, and you'll always report the outermost packaging level. That's obviously the one that's commercially distributed. And if there's multiple levels, then there's some metrics and volumes that need to be calculated for the innermost packaging level. In the event there's intermediate packages or even the innermost package, if they're sold on their own, then they also need to be listed and reported. So once you have the list of the products in front of you, you do need to pull from your manufacturing and operations team, what are the volumes that were actually distributed by month? So this is very granular, and some companies had to submit annual reports for BLAs and NDAs and so on, but in ANDAs, but that is not granular enough to satisfy this requirement. Each month needs to be individually tallied, and then there's a grand total, you know, for a month or for a year at the end. So this is pretty rigorous and might be causing you to go about the countryside and looking at trying to find some contacts in your operations team that can help you out with these numbers. Now, I did try to represent this hierarchy just so you have a better understanding of the particular elements that need to be structured. First of all, at the highest level, for each establishment that you have, you will need to identify the DUNS number. And inside that particular establishment DUNS number, there could be one to many. I have the first business operation here as manufacturer. And then let's say manufacturing a product that has 30 pills in a bottle, and my product 111 there is my drug NDC. So I would need to identify that as, you know, the innermost package. Now I might actually sell that bottle, so I would have to report that as well on a separate line item. But many cases you have a package hierarchy. So you might place two of those bottles in a box, and that would actually be a different drug NDC number. And then you'd have to, I see a typo there, that's not an NDC number, looks like a G10 number, but we'll fix that when we distribute the information here in the PowerPoint presentation. So this would be a next higher level of packaging. So this would be the outermost, the box would be the outermost packaging, and then report quantities for that, and then also do the math to figure out how many actual bottles were distributed. Now, in addition to that 111 product, I also might have at that very establishment for that very same business operation another product that's my 222 product. And in this particular case, I have 20 pills in that bottle. Let's say I don't have a package hierarchy, and that's the actual commercial distributed product level. And then, that would need to be reported as well. And yet I'm not done. So I might have other business operations at that particular site. So I might have some API manufacturer. Now I have a drum with a 333 product identified, and its story continues. So you might have a relabeling operation and have drug products connected with that and so on. So really you need to flesh out this tree and identify this tree, this hierarchy for your particular portfolio of products and establishments, and understanding what each of these particular items, how are they related, and what the metrics are. The reason for that is, we'll see that in a minute, all of these values are then reported in the report. So having this structure in your mind and building it out, and then collecting data, actually production counts at each of these commercially distributed levels is very important.
Yeah, and Gary, to the point there about the bulk, right? We've heard a lot of questions, and in one of the industry working group meetings where FDA did present, and they explained, or a question was asked. So we might provide drums of API, but we might not fill the entire drum, but we only have one packaging level of drum that we are registering. So really, the main point here is that FDA has established a draft guidance. They've established a way to do this. Gary's, we're going to cover some of that in the next couple of slides, and it's not quite perfected yet, right? FDA said that this is, we're going to work through this and we're going to get it right. And a lot of the future of this could potentially be additional data elements. We see that a lot, right? As requirements evolve, it could even mean this type of report moves from a CSV file to a XML file, right? It could mean they add additional data elements. It's just right now, this first baseline that's due in just a couple of days is going to be in what it is, right? And what it is now, and we'll get there, right? So that's one of the things I did want to address. I know that's part of the a lot of the questions we're hearing is, well, what happens when it's drum, but drum it's not showing the exact amounts in the drum. Well, that's you're letting them know how many drums you're shipping out. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of questions I think that need to be fleshed out, and as these reports come due, I think the FDA is going to have to field a lot of questions, and then hopefully maybe a year or two it actually settle down and be a little bit more well established. But right now it's state of flux. I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So the actual submission requirement, it comes into the FDA by way of the CDER Next Gen portal. So this is a portal that's been around for a number of years to handle communication about NDA and other types of applications, but now it's been expanded to also include the drug distribution report submission. And you can go to the website, make a manual entry, or you can upload a comma-separated values file, CSV file, and the FDA does supply a template there. The data values that you'll need to have in place, the ones on the left are entry for each submission, and they're basically metadata. Who is the submitter, and a little bit about the submission, what year is it, and so on. And then the list on the right are those actual fields that we were taking a look at earlier, where for each row in this particular report, you would need to fill in some of these. Now, some of these might be blank, they're not applicable. For example, you may not always have a source NDC. And in some cases, if you have both, if you only have a single product level, then that would be the outermost package, and then you don't need to report the innermost. But there's some special situations there. We don't have time to go into all those details. I do want to show you this particular set of elements in a sample file. Now, this happens to be a spreadsheet, but it is able to be saved as a CSV file and then submitted, and actually does have to be saved as a CSV file for submission. And you get an idea for each of your product NDCs. It'll have establishment DUNS number, a business operation, and then quantities for those packaging levels that we talked about for each month. So January through December, and then an annual total. So there's a lot of information, detailed counts here that need to be generated for each of those individual products. And fleshing out that tree, you know, there's 13 lines here for each one of those instances, those particular combinations. So I just want to touch on real quickly here the plan. How do you go about meeting this compliance requirement? I would first recommend that you create an environment, get the right team together, understand your requirements, and then identify that hierarchy that we looked at. That's very crucial to establish that. And then third is actually collect the product counts, and that happens on an annual basis. So, you know, it's not a one-time activity. So you have to keep all of this current. And then lastly, you know, build that report and actually submit it. The other question that we have as you start to put this plan together is, what are the due dates? And David, I'm going to ask you to jump in here and provide some information about when all this is due, and there's a real short timing on this first couple submissions, so maybe we can understand that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And so here in 2022, you see we have two reporting periods FDA's anticipating for us. One of the questions we get pretty frequently is also, is this going to get pushed back, right? We'll talk about some of that in the frequently asked questions, but hey, we're moving forward and supporting clients that we're anticipating it's not going to be changed, right? FDA's put out a lot of information. They've put out training videos on the Next Gen portal, and they've answered some questions, right? So now, what's first? So February 15th, 2 weeks from now, we have our first reporting period, which is all data the data from the volumes we've manufactured in 2020. So again, back to what Gary had mentioned, was when you're gathering that information, yeah, we're uniquely positioned here as an organization that's assisting with the preparation of SPL XML and the drug listings. So we understand a lot of that data. But understanding what we've manufactured in each of these calendar years is going to be critical, right? So now, shortly thereafter, May 16th, you know, springtime, we're getting ready for the nice weather, at least here on the East Coast, and here we go. 2021 data has to be submitted through. One of the things in talking with some of our clients is there might be a unique scenario where 2020 we might not have as much to report from what we may have in 2019 or 2018, right? Due to the COVID pandemic, things slowed down a bit, right? There was a time where many supply chains and many areas of the world were completely shut down. So you know, really that concept Gary had talked about of creating a cross-functional working group, whether you're a manufacturer of your own products or a contract manufacturer or a private label distributor that are working together with different manufacturers or distributors, ensuring you know who's doing what, who's gathering what data, and then more importantly, who's reporting and submitting. And then at the come 2023, the concept will be you're always reporting on the previous year's data on February 15th of the following year. So this is an annual submission. Now, what we're viewing here is really that where does this fit within the broader scheme of the many different submissions that we face in the pharmaceutical regulatory affairs side of the industry, right? So there's the drug distribution reporting. Look at that as kind of one of those wrapping up the end of the year, getting into the new year reports that we have to submit. While a lot of what we're doing is typically towards the tail end of each year during the drug label listing and labeling submissions. Now, this year specifically is going to be that unique scenario of the two reports. But moving forward after that, you'll expect that February date And FDA has also mentioned that this can replace the data that you're submitting in the annual report if you're submitting it through this method as well. So things to keep in mind, and for the human prescription drug side of the industry. So things to keep in mind is our friends in the over-the-counter space, this is all pretty new maybe, right? You may not have been doing anything like this, especially that concept of distributors and DC codes also have to be reported on, not just the manufacturer's codes. So again, it's that building a cross-functional team internally and with your partners will align you for success. And if you haven't started doing so, get started because there's only 2 weeks left.
Yeah, this is a particular tough year. Obviously, 2 reports first, short notice. And then I'll just quickly mention at the end of the year, we do have REMS being submitted in SPL for those new and changed REMS content. So at the end of the year, going forward after that milestone, companies do have to be aware of that particular deadline. So this 2022 is actually pretty busy as far as the regulatory agenda. Let's talk a little bit about the preparation and submission, David. You able to go in and cover some details on what must be done and how ReTech can actually help?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like we were talking earlier, looking on the from left to right here, the FDA and the draft guidance are talking about registrants, right? But as we all know, it's not always the registrant or the manufacturer who's submitting all this. In many cases, that might be the case, right? And those manufacturers might be gathering this data for all of their private label distributors they support. Again, creating that working group internally to ensure you're wrapping your minds around this concept and bringing it together. But really what we assist our clients with and what we can assist industry with is making sense of the data elements that are all there, right? We are experts in the SPL XML. That's the method of the electronic drug registration listing process. The core concept is discovering all of the manufacturing facility DUNS numbers and the business operations that are part of each of our drug listings that register our NDC codes. So really that baseline, really what we can do, we work with organizations in different ways, right? Some of our clients who might be using our single source for drug product data management tool, we can run a very easy report, provide that data within less than a day, right? The information's there for you now to start reviewing and filling in the volumes. Other organizations might strictly just distribute, right? But they're taking control of that report. We see that happen a lot with organizations that may have very recognizable brands, that may work with many different contract manufacturers. And in those scenarios, they want to ensure that this is getting done in a timely manner, and in their internal systems, they're able to see the lots that they've received that have been manufactured. So in that scenario, really pulling all that data together, we also have a method of extracting data, the information that's been submitted to DailyMed through this electronic drug registration service, and in pre-populating a baseline report, if you will. And then the other aspect of what we do here is organizations who might not fall into those two, right? Organizations who you might just be a contract manufacturer and that information is not made public, right? You're manufactured under contract drug listings are only going to the FDA, and we kind of internally talk about it like this black hole where the information goes. Well, your trusted resource in ReTech has that information, and we can ensure that we assist in really digging into the information, pulling the right details for the files, ensuring that you can then provide the volumes and start the communication. And then from there, once it's been, we'll validate it here, build that report, and then put it into the final format for submission.
Very good. I think if you want to touch on this, some of the actual offerings, I think you touched on those a little bit in that discussion.
Yeah, and really to summarize, we're here to help you, right? If this is something that you're just looking for some clarity on items and you can prepare your file and submit it, great. We'd like to help provide the clarity. If it's something where you don't even know where to get started with gathering the data and you'd like us to build the report, we can do that. And if you have those complicated nuances and are looking for us to really hold hands through it, we can help. And then when it comes to the next gen portal and the submission, we can also support industry with that as well.
Yeah, very good. Thanks for that summary, David. That's really good. Aaron, I see we're going a little bit long here. Let's perhaps try to fit in maybe one or two questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will say we have gone about 6 minutes over. So I think what we'll do is just skip over the frequently asked questions for today, and we can actually follow up with everyone in email about that. But we did get tons of audience questions that came in. So maybe we'll stay on for another 10 minutes or so and answer some of those if anyone is able to hang on and would like to hear some answers. And I want to thank the audience for all the participation. We had many, many questions.
And then Aaron, I do want to also, sorry, go ahead, Gary.
I was just going to say, I think we could have had another full half hour of Q&A, but we'll try to roll it out under the FAQs and get back to everybody.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to mention is we really do value the participation in our clients, and part of what we also like to do is gather this information, and if it isn't a question we've seen that's been kicked over to FDA or we've asked it, we like to consolidate them and get them to the FDA so we can get those answers. So sometime our answer to you might be, we're still waiting on that clarification. Other times it might be actually through some of the correspondence, this is what we're hearing. But a lot of times that correspondence we hear isn't what's in the written draft guidance. So yeah, Aaron, why don't we kick off some of the questions we've seen and we'll start addressing them to the extent that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to start with one that I know is going to be a favorite for both of you, Gary and Dave. So this is only a draft guidance. Do I have to do it?
Well, I'll kick that to Gary. Gary, you've seen a lot more of these draft guidance than I have in my day. So
yeah, it's a draft guidance always has that header that says this is for comment period only sort of thing. And yet we have seen in the past the FDA actually point to draft guidances and operate under draft guidances and expect industry to comply. Now, yes, you can make the argument that this is not legal requirement, but it's certainly reflecting where the FDA stands today, and they have made some public timing requirements on their website about the due dates. So it's I think a requirement that ought to be complied with if you want to stand in good or remain in good standings with the FDA. So I think the other side of that, as David had mentioned, you can actually propose an alternative or talking about an extension to the FDA, and that would be granted perhaps individually, but that rarely happens, to be honest with you. So I think this draft guidance is going to be enforced. I do expect the final guidance to come out, as we mentioned, and that might reinforce some things. But and again, it's going to be the FDA's actual mode of operation in the next few weeks to determine how this comes about. Now, earlier this week, I will mention it was just yesterday that I saw some emails from the FDA, and they reaffirmed the deadline. So it's not like they're hiding or changing it. I see no indication that they will delay. But anyway, go ahead with the next one.
Sure. Actually, probably the most frequent question that we got today was whether or not samples that are provided to doctors and physicians directly through a company's sales team need to be reported, or only drugs that are being sold.
Yeah, the one thing I will mention is the FDA doesn't qualify the distribution, whether it's a paid transaction or whether it's a free transaction, free sample. So our understanding is that samples would have to be included.
Yeah, the general rule of thumb we've been working off of is if the NDC code's drug listed, you should report it unless it's falling outside of the inner package, outer package, right? So if it's part of a packaging configuration of in between the inner and outer, then it should be drug listed, yeah. I'm sorry, reported.
Okay. So would you need to list the establishment the product is registered under or the establishment that manufactures the product?
I'm sorry, what was that one again?
Would you need to list the establishment that the product is registered under or the establishment that manufactures the product?
I mean, I'll take a stab here. So every drug listed product should reference the manufacturing facility that is manufacturing the product. So the distributors are registering with the drug listing process the product and an NDC code that represents that product and its packaging levels. The manufacturers are also required, when it's a CMO, private label distributor scenario, to register an NDC code for that product that they manufacture for that distributor. So the FDA is expecting both codes have volumes reported. And again, this comes back to that concept of, in the draft guidance, it wasn't explained fully that way, but in subsequent meetings we've attended, they explained it that way. Now, Read Tech, we're here to help you with it and work through it and make it easy to kind of prepare that data. But if the question is what manufacturer should we be listing? If you have multiple manufacturers, you're going to want to check with each manufacturer and see if they've registered it. Gary, do you have any other thoughts on that question?
Well, there's one other, I didn't actually see that question. Maybe it takes a little bit more understanding of the context. But the other slant on that particular question could be, if you're a manufacturing company and have multiple establishments, one does maybe the original API, and then that product is moved to another manufacturing site, another establishment where it's I don't know, maybe it's final compounding, and yet a third for actual labeling and distribution. So all of that is inside your control, and you might only list the product that is commercially distributed. You know, it might be actually being distributed out of the final labeling establishment. Those other two internal establishments, many times those NDCs are not even listed, but in our understanding is that the establishment site where the product is actually turned over to the new ownership, it's outside your control, it's now technically in commercial distribution, is the particular establishment that needs to be referred to. The other ones are just internal establishments along the way. Yes, they have to be registered, but in this case, it's our understanding that products does not have to be reported as to the volumes, as long as it's inside your enterprise. You know, if there's another third party involved, then you know that particular party has to report all their establishments as well in this supply scenario.
And that's where it gets confusing, right, Gary?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's try another one there, Aaron.
All right. And this is something I haven't heard a lot about, so this might be a takeaway question. But we did get a lot of questions about drugs being imported into the U.S. and if the importer needs to report the quantities that are being imported.
Yeah, definitely. It's our understanding that would have to be reported for that particular operation. So as you bring products in across the border, that is now a listed product. Even APIs, for convenience, making sure everything goes smoothly across the border, have NDCs connected to them, and many times they are listed as well. So all of that, as soon as it becomes listed, it now becomes a qualified product that needs to be reported upon. So David, did you have any other understanding on that?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head, Gary. And again, it comes back to, if, like you were mentioning with the supply chain and how it can be nuanced, wherever the drug listing NDC is the item you need to ensure that you're reporting the volumes on,
Great.
even if it is imported. Yeah.
And then adversely, we had a lot of questions about drugs that are manufactured in the United States but are being exported. Do we need to report on quantities exported?
Well, there is a particular scenario where products that are manufactured in the U.S. and then exported, there's some dedicated fields for non-U.S. Distribution. And actually, those companies that have the annual reporting requirement under an NDA, ANDA, or BLA might want to definitely fill that particular field in and provide that granular information. The advantage of doing that is with that drug distribution report, then they no longer have to report the annual quantities in their annual report. So you have to do the drug distribution report anyway. And if you break it out, show the internal domestic distribution as well as the non-US distribution, then you have the advantage of not going into that detail in your annual report. So yes, it's definitely supported where the export volumes need to be reported.
Great. All right, let's maybe tackle one more live online before we wrap this up. So are all over-the-counter drugs required to report, or just any products with certain active ingredients? Specifically, are hand sanitizers required to report?
So David, are hand sanitizers listed?
Hand sanitizers are drug listed, and yeah,
Okay.
our interpretation is all over-the-counter drug products. Part of the things we've been hearing, or part of the questions and conversations we've been having are, well, there was an exemption with hand sanitizers at a certain point, right? Well, a lot of what we're looking at is there were organizations in 2020 who prepared, manufactured, distributed hand sanitizers under the emergency kind of request or call from the agency.
Right,
yeah. And so, our interpretation is, well, some organizations did it and they're out of that business, right? They're not doing it anymore. Okay. If those are the scenarios, you need to make sure the appropriate EDRLS data, electronic drug registration and listing data, is nestled away and archived properly. But our interpretation is that this is a report that the agency is looking for year after year after year. And the last I checked, the hand sanitizer kind of exemption didn't absolve you of the drug listing part. And this report is pointing towards what has been drug listed in the NDCs. So I would lean towards more of a risk-averse approach here and say, okay, they're asking for it, we'll give it to them. But I've heard this question before, and it was like, well, why? They were giving us a pass here to help and provide safety for all of us with hand sanitizer because there's a potential shortage. But that's how I look at it, at least personally. But it could be something that we kick over again to the FDA as well to get additional clarity towards.
Yeah, I think it comes under the question about, would the hand sanitizer be currently distributed under the emergency use authorization, and is there listing requirements connected with that? If that answer is no, then I think there might be an argument that says you don't have to do the drug listing or the drug distribution report. But for those products that are not under that EUA anymore, then now they have the listing requirements, and then the drug distribution report would definitely come into play. So again, many of these things need to be fleshed out, and we try to provide a lot more of these different scenarios in the FAQ document that we'll make available to you.
Yeah, and Gary, to clarify, it was, I just pulled it up real quick because I always had the link right there on my my web browser. It's the FDA had a temporary guidance for alcohol-based hand sanitizers, and they have since withdrawn that. But that does It is a very valid question, and it did not absolve you from the drug listing process, though.
Right.
That temporary
Okay.
guidance, you still had to drug list.
All right.
And it was kind of FDA's way of saying, well, who's bringing these products to the market? And since Customs and the FDA have so many processes in place for allowing drug products into the United States, you had to do it the right way. Or if you were manufacturing outside of the US, those products wouldn't have gotten in.
Yeah, definitely. So it sounds like under the EUA, you still had to list. So I think the deduction
and,
there
you know,
is that they have
and that drug listing process definitely helped, right? Because it helped in doing what it's meant to do. It stopped product that may have been harmful for our citizens here of coming across the border and in several scenarios. But yeah, we'll get some more clarity for you on that question. Unfortunately, the clarity might not come from the agency within the next 2 weeks. So again, our perspective is especially if it's one hand sanitizer you're preparing or one formulation, it's a little easier to gather that data opposed to an organization that may have several hand sanitizers and several hundred other over-the-counter products. So we understand it's complicated. There's a lot of questions still, but our perspective has been, if there is question or doubt, let's get the report through, and we'll get more clarity as this evolves with FDA.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. So we would love to keep going, but we are about 20 minutes over, and I have about 75 more questions. So I don't think we're going to tackle them all today, but we do promise to work hard getting together some frequently asked question documentation, some question and answers as well. And you guys can look for that in your inbox along with the slides and the recording later this week. We really appreciate all of the audience participation today. And Gary, thank you for this slide. If you have any burning questions before we get back to you, definitely feel free to reach out to us directly, pharma@readtech.com, or our phone number right there, 215-557-3010. We would be happy to hear from you. And other than that, Gary and David, thank you for the great presentation today and all the information. And we hope to speak to you all again real soon.
Yep.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. And sorry for the technical difficulties earlier.